Hey guys, welcome back to Elise Reads and Speaks. I am doing my February wrap-up today, and again, I read 10 books. You know, this trend is not going to continue, so I'm going to give myself a pat on the back right now because I'm quite proud. So I'm going to go chronologically through the month of what I read first and what I read last. I will tell you that my favorite books were towards the end of the month, so if you can hang on that long, you'll be getting some better reviews from me. So to begin, Dry by Neal and Jarrod Shusterman. I listened to the audiobook and it was a good read. It was a very good read. It's a story about the what if would happen if the water in your community dried up. What would you do? Where would you find water? We all can't survive without water. So you would expect that everyone would become a little aggressive with each other trying to survive. And that's exactly what happens in the book. I gave this one 4 stars. The reason I didn't give it 5, even though I was so into the story, was because I really wasn't into the characters. Again, I've mentioned Scythe by Neal Shusterman, and I was really into those characters. I was rooting for them, and I felt for them. The characters in Dry, I couldn't even tell you their names right now, so I wasn't so invested in them, but I was really captivated by the story. Like, some of those people became the worst versions of themselves, whereas other ones were really trying to help the community along. And it kind of made you think, you know, where would I fall? And I wrote this in my review. I think about my kid, and honestly, I would do anything for him. I would become super aggressive. So I understand some of the actions and the decisions that some of these characters made, and it makes you question the type of person that you are in a crisis. It was a good read, so I recommend the audiobook that I listened to. I felt like I went through it really fast. Next on my list is Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan. This one had a lot of hype, and I was not into it. And I'm kind of into that fairy type-ish world. It's not exactly fairies, but all of these people that could like transform into an animal like that, I'm really into that. I think it's very interesting. And this, I just did not grab me. I think it got a lot of hype because of the lesbian relationship in there, because there's finally some LGBT representation, which is great, and I love that, and I think there should be more representation, but this just, it fell flat for me. I mean, just because a book is diverse doesn't mean that it's a good book. Like, I think I gave it 3 stars for originality, and there was some good stuff in there, but I wasn't into it. And I will tell you, there's this part in the beginning that just kind of like ripped my heart out, and it had nothing to do with the rest of the story. I do not respond well to animal abuse of any kind, and I'm not spoiling anything by saying that a dog dies in the very beginning of the book. The way that the dog dies, it was very, very hard for me to listen to. I listened to this audiobook too, and it was one of those that I was like, oh my gosh, do I even want to continue on with this story? Is that what the rest of the book is going to be like? And it wasn't, and the dog is mentioned maybe once or twice in the remainder of the story. But for a big animal lover, it was very jarring. So if you are an animal lover and that stuff kind of gets to you, just be prepared. In the beginning of the story, you're not going to like it. You're not going to like it. Moving on, the next book that I read in February was Past Perfect by Leila Sales. I was in the middle of that during my January wrap-up, and I read the physical book, and I'll tell you right now, it takes me a lot longer to get through physical books than I do with audiobooks. Physical books, I read in my bed at the end of the day, and like I've said in previous videos, I'm very busy, okay? I'm a mom, I'm an SLP, I'm a drama teacher, I'm an actor. By the time I get to bed, I read about a page or two, and I'm like, okay? So it takes me longer to get through physical books. Okay, so now that we've tackled that, Past Perfect by Leila Sales. It was a fun read. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. I would consider this one like a summer read. It's fun. It's not too memorable. It deals with reenactment actors, and I have been an actor at the Renaissance Fair, and I thought it pegged it pretty well, like the type of actors that you will meet if you're working at one of these places. But again, it's not too memorable. It was like a good one-time read. I probably won't pick it up again. Next, moving on, Everless and Evermore by Sara Holland. Okay. I will start by saying I reread Everless because I read my review and I didn't remember much about the story, but I apparently liked it last year. And I was like, well, I want to read the next one, so let me just refresh my memory. So I listened to the audiobook, and again, I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was very interesting. They have this whole thing about bloodletting in there, and that you can pay for things with, a couple drops or maybe even a vial of your blood. They can tell how much time they're taking from you. They're taking time from your life, which is interesting. I haven't read that in a story before, so that really spoke to me. I was like, okay, this is a cool world that we're living in. So I went into Evermore with this oomph of like, hey, I like this world. I like what's happening. I like the climax at the end of Everless because I did not see that coming. There's like this big reveal, and it took me by surprise. I didn't see it coming at all. Evermore was a flop for me. I mean, it just focused on stuff that I didn't care about. Like all this stuff about the sorceress and the alchemist and flashbacks between them that just weren't interesting. Blah. Ugh. It was a letdown. I mean, I never go from giving a book 4 stars and then giving it sequel 2. I mean, that should tell you how much I really didn't like Evermore. I paid attention, and I mean, it held my attention, but by the time I got to the end of the book, I was like, oh, gosh, like how? How did we get there? How did we get there? I really liked the first one, and I really did not like the second one. Bleh. Huh. Next up was A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahereh Mafi. Now, this was the February book choice for my book club, and I was underwhelmed. I felt like I was promised about a Muslim girl after a 9/11 that's battling Islamophobia, and I got a love story about a boy named Ocean. Like, what just happened? It was a bummer. It was very underwhelming for me. I lived in New York, not the city, but like an hour and a half, 2 hours away from New York when 9/11 happened. So I vividly remember the Islamophobia. Like, I really remember that. I mean, I'm not Muslim, and that's something that stuck with me. And I was expecting to read a story from that point of view. And the book started off strong. I mean, this character, this main girl, is a very strong character. And then it just kind of turned to mush. I mean, anything that was in the present tense was her feelings about Ocean. And then all the other action, it was like talking about it as if it already happened. It was just, it was a bummer. I can't remember if I gave this 2 or 3 stars. I mean, there was some good stuff about it that I liked. Like I said, it started off strong. It really did. And then it just lost it. It lost it. So that's Shatter Me and A Very Large Expanse of Sea that I have read by that author that I'm not impressed with. I don't think she's for me. But the good news is that from there, I went on to the Firebird Trilogy by Claudia Gray. This is my second time reading the Firebird Trilogy. I listened to these audiobooks about a year and a half ago, and I really enjoyed them. It was one of those series that stuck with me. It was like multiverse travel, like you're traveling to different parallel dimensions, and I was just into it. So I recommended it for my book club. So my book club is reading 1,000 Pieces of You this month for March. And I was like, well, let me refresh my memory since it was my book choice. And man, I love them even more the second time around. So again, I said it was multiverse travel, and just the things that it makes me think of and question, that's what I really like about it. So the idea of this whole multiverse world is that if you've made a big decision in your life, immediately this other universe splits off where the opposite decision is made. So, I think about my life and the big decisions that I've made, and I don't know, it's just kind of cool and almost kind of like soothing to think that there's another universe where the opposite decision was made, that all these other Elises out there are having these completely different lives, even though we're all the same person. It's just really cool to think about. I mean, maybe there's an Elise out there that's not drowning in school debt from going to a private school. Maybe she made the smart decision and went to a cheaper school. Or maybe there's an Elise out there that decided to get an abortion. I mean, I have a son. Maybe she made the choice to get an abortion. She's living a completely different life. I mean, I know it sounds weird, but I really like that idea, and the fact that it makes me think about those things. This series, it just really spoke to me. The other thing I really like about it is that in all of these parallel universes, you come across the same people that really mean something to your life. Maybe you come across some of them in some worlds and not some others, but the people that really mean something in your life, you're going to cross them in every universe because they're meant to be there. I really like that idea too. And I like that it's not you just visiting another dimension. You travel by consciousness. So if you're traveling to a different dimension, your consciousness is put into your body in a different dimension. So it's like you're the same person, but not, which gets into some ethical issues. I do not want to spoil anything, but I will say there are some definite ethical issues in this book. I can understand how that is a turn off for people that read it. I really like that aspect of it, thinking, what's right, what's wrong? This person is me, but they're not me, and I'm making decisions in their body. Is this right? I don't know. I like the ethical dilemmas that it placed. And I am a sucker for a love triangle. And I loved this love triangle. Marguerite, Paul, and Theo. I really like each of them. It's not one of them where I'm like a die hard on one team. I mean, yeah, okay. I like Team Paul and I go for Team Paul. But I really like Theo as a person too. And I like that there's a love triangle where you really respect each person. And all three of them really love each other too. I love this series and I can't recommend it enough. And again, I know that there's people probably that hate it because of the ethical dilemmas that I mentioned before. But if you're into multiverse travel, give this series a try. It grips me and it makes me question things about my own life. And I think that's the mark of a really good book. The last book that I read this month was Fatal Throne. That's by a bunch of different authors that are collaborating. Fatal Throne was great. I am a Tudor nerd through and through, and it was just, it was like reading fan fiction. It was great. And each author that contributes to it is taking the thoughts of a different queen and Henry's perspective too. And at the end, there's Elizabeth, for a page or two. It's really about the wives of Henry VIII. And it was great. It was really great. The most surprising and enlightening thing for me was whoever wrote Anne of Cleves. Okay, in the book, it's Anna of Cleves, but I've always read Anne of Cleves. I don't know what it is. If it's Anne of Cleves or Anna of Cleves, feel free to correct me. I don't know. But I've never been that interested in her because she wasn't around for that long. She wasn't married to Henry VIII that long. She didn't really do much, so I haven't given her any thought. But in this book, I thought her story was really compelling. And when you think about the fact that, she is the one queen that lived, it's making me think that Anne of Cleves is a little more clever than we give her credit for. She got out of that madness alive. And the story that was written from her perspective, it was good. It gave her some backbone. And I was like, this is a character I can get behind. And it's not even a character. I mean, it's a real person, someone that really lived. And it's fun to think that, maybe this was their train of thought. I will say that I had this strange obsession with Anne Boleyn. I love her. I find her absolutely fascinating. I mean, if there were 5 people that I could meet in heaven, she would be one of them. I think she's just incredible. There's so much going on in her life that I just want to know the truth. And I mean, she kept this king at her heels for years before she married him. So that being said, I've read many, many, many Anne Boleyn books. And I've read many books about the wives of King Henry VIII. So I fully expected myself to just check out after Anne Boleyn. I mean, after she dies, hey, it's not a spoiler, okay? Her head gets chopped off. That's what happens in real life. After she dies, I usually just lose interest because Jane Seymour to me is so boring, blah. But that didn't happen because this book was so well written. I saw perspectives of Jane Seymour and Anne of Cleves and Catherine Howard and Catherine Parr that I hadn't seen before. And I wanted to know what they thought. And I wanted to know from their perspective how they saw Henry. And this book gave it to me. If you are a fellow Tudor nerd, I highly recommend this book. Give it a read. All right, guys, that concludes my February wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for tuning in to Elise Reads and Speaks, and I will catch you next time.